silence button. Okay, hello, this is Bob Thorne. Today's date is March 21st, 2012. Okay, you can take that piece of paper down for the wife, Thomas, thanks. March 21st, 2012. I'm interviewing Dr. Julian Heicklen on some of the things that he has to talk about what's going on in this country, as well as jury nullification. I originally been in contact with Ilona Blakely, who was Aaron Russo's press secretary, and she called me up. I knew her very well. That she wanted me to go to see a federal trial that was going on in Newark Federal Court and then downtown Manhattan Federal Court with Judge Kimball Wood with regard to his jury nullification situation. I got to know him through that, and maybe it's best that Dr. Heicklen, Heicklen, who had been a physical chemistry professor at Penn State University, just tell a little bit about himself and jury nullification and the issues that he's been involved in over the past many years as a political activist, somebody trying to get the truth out of the government, jury nullification, etc. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Heicklen.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
Okay. You were at Penn State as a physical chemist for
Yes,
a number of years. Yeah.
Yep, 25 years I was at Penn State.
Yeah, and okay, so maybe you could tell us about this most recent issue of jury nullification and what happened with Judge Kimball Wood and the one in Newark that I saw, along with A. Ainsworth Hunt and a few other people, and what happened subsequent to that, and how you got there in a trial related to jury nullification, and then you spent, I believe it was something like 6 months in jail.
No, not that long.
How long?
Well, I've been in jail six times. 15 times. But the longest was 3 weeks.
Okay.
So far, though I'm under a sentence for 145 days, but that's on appeal at the moment.
Okay. So what was... Oh, you also just got back from the Freedom Law Conference where you were one of the speakers with Payman Madhadeh in California just a couple of days ago. You want to talk about that? Maybe even what was your subject of discussion that you gave your presentation about?
Well, I discussed the jury nullification situation in New York. Basically, I discussed the trial from the beginning until the present time. I started distributing jury nullification literature at the New York District Court as a result of another lawsuit where I was suing the New York City Police for a previous arrest, which we could discuss if you wish. But anyway, and what I found out in that suit is that one of the court rules was that the judge must instruct the jury that it must uphold the law as he gives it to him. Mm-hmm. And I knew that this wasn't true. I'd been affiliated with the Fully Informed Jury Association before. In fact, many years ago I was the actual Pennsylvania representative for the Fully Informed Jury Association. And so I went to the court yard at the court on one Monday and distributed one of the Fully Informed Jury Association flyers. It was actually called a primer for jury duty, something of that sort, plus a little sheet of paper, a flyer which I had made myself, which said that the judge will instruct the jury that it must uphold the law as he gives it to them. He will be lying. The duty of the jury is to see that justice is done.
The judge instructs the jury to interpret the law and judge the person. I mean,
not to interpret the law.
As he gives the law to them, as he gives it to them.
He says, and this is a rule of the federal courts. Every federal court judge in any trial is supposed to give this.
And as the judge gives it to them does not mean that that's an unbiased way of him giving it to it. Very often it's given in a very biased way.
It's perjury.
Yeah, what the judge is giving...
It's actually perjury with the intent to obstruct justice.
Yeah, so the judge is doing that. He's violating the law himself quite frequently.
Right.
Yeah.
Not frequently, at every trial.
Yeah. It's dishonesty in the judiciary. It's really terrible dishonesty. I mean, one of the examples would be if there's a little bit of a rule that somebody, does some minor little thing, there's a law in the books that they can get them into jail for 20 years for spitting on a sidewalk, let's say, because they need more people in the prison labor system. We've got now 30 times the incarceration rate of China, and we've got more people in jail in our FEMA detention centers than China. They're a big part of the prison labor system. And it's pretty well known that the father of George Bush Sr., Prescott Sheldon Bush, was a business partner with the Nazis in Auschwitz, the concentration camp, the labor camp. Did you know that?
I didn't.
Yeah. Prescott Sheldon Bush was a business partner with the people in Auschwitz in terms of prison labor. So it turns out, as according to Michael Rupert also, the Los Angeles narcotics detective who got shot at and exposed the CIA involvement in drug dealing, he pointed out in his video, The Truth and the Lies of 9/11, I got a copy of shortly after 9/11, that the Bush family is one of the major stockholders, if not the major stockholder, in Corrections Corporation of America, I think it is, and maybe Wackenhut, that's another one. So they're continuing the tradition of Prescott Sheldon Bush of getting people into these federal prisons where they're used essentially as slave labor, and they make a lot of money off it. And I believe Michael Rupert also said that the husband of New Jersey governor at that time, Christy Todd Whitman, had the contract of the major food supplier to either Corrections Corporation of America or Wackenhut, I can't remember which one it was. So this whole thing is rigged, and it's been a family tradition of people like the Bushes in their dealings with the Nazis for a period of time. Okay,
Well,
so it's not
the thing
just
is,
system.
it's not just the Bushes. Everybody in Congress
Is rigged in this situation.
what they do is, when they're about to pass a law, okay, or
Yeah.
they're considering passing a law, is that they then invest in the corporations that are going to benefit from this law,
Yeah.
and they make very rapid amounts of money, and there's apparently nothing illegal about this.
And this is many of our congressmen and senators who are
No,
involved in
not
this.
many,
Okay.
almost all.
Almost all, really.
In fact, I'm reading the book that says throw them all out, and in fact he points out that he could name the few that don't do that.
Oh, is that right? I didn't realize it was quite that bad. Well, it's pretty well known that the CIA, as according to Michael Rupert, certain elements of that were bringing huge amounts of cocaine money into the United States with the help of Bill Clinton. When he was in Arkansas, he used to provide the state police escort for the trucks that were leaving Mena Regional Mountain Airport loaded with the cocaine, so the good state police would not pull them over and do the arrests. When you'll see these police officers talking on the news about Bill Clinton's girlfriends, it really isn't anything about Bill Clinton's girlfriends. Most of these police officers want to tell how Bill Clinton facilitated the illegal drug trade with loading the cocaine off the planes at Mena Regional Intermountain Airport and facilitated the drug trade, getting it out in distribution in cities. These people should be behind bars, quicker than any of the people who sell a little cocaine or use a little cocaine out of the street.
Why should any of them be behind bars? Anybody
Yeah, that's
should
a
be
good
able
point.
to sell
You've got a good
cocaine.
point there,
None of them
because it should
belong.
be free.
None of them belong behind bars.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, the laws, should accommodate that. You're right. It's the government restricting us way too much by saying we can't do
It's
this.
none of the
we can't-
government's
It's
business.
none of their business. You're right. It's not in the Constitution that it's their responsibility or their authority.
Well,
to do
it's in the
this.
Constitution that it's none of their
It's
business.
in none of their business. Okay, so they're just not abiding by the Constitution. That's what the situation is.
I mean, so that you say Bill Clinton should be in prison, he certainly shouldn't, and neither should anybody else who's in the drug trade.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying if they're going by the
I
same
mean, he may
laws,
should be in prison for something else.
Yeah.
I don't know what his other
he should be
activities
in jail
are.
for a lot else. Yeah.
Okay, but that's a different
Yeah.
story.
Well, what I would say is this. When George Bush was the vice president, he was also president of Vice in the United States. He was the guy responsible for bringing in most of the cocaine in his ties with the CIA and everything like that, and money laundering the money through the banks and everything like that. And if ever anybody deserves to be going to jail for a real long time, it should be George Bush Sr., with his position also having been CIA director and all like that, facilitating all this, what the laws were at that time, illegal drug trade. But when you get people in New York City who might use a little bit of a gram of it, or some people at a party, or they might sell a little bit of it, and they go to jail into these prison systems that they're making a lot of money off of, and you got a cocaine kingpin like George Bush, who basically, is becoming president after being president of Vice, in the early 1990s. There's something hypocritical about that.
There's even a more ridiculous situation that we have here in New Jersey, is that medical marijuana is legal, but possession of it is a crime. And so I've been to one trial already, and I'm going to another trial a week from Tuesday, I think, where fellows were in California. They have a sickness that they treat with medical marijuana. They legally bought the medical marijuana in California, and they came to New Jersey, and they were both arrested and on trial for possession of marijuana.
And here it's necessary for their health, and here we've got some of these
They have
thugs-
doctors' prescriptions for
and
it.
here they've got
California.
these thugs telling them that they can't do this, which is necessary.
This is similar to the sort of thing is, if you went and got married in California and then came to New Jersey, you're not married anymore. I mean, or divorced or anything. I mean, if we don't follow the states, honor the other states' rules, I mean, it becomes anarchy. In fact, we honor other countries' rules that have nothing to do with us. If you come from any country in the world and you're married, you're married.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, it's not like you can undo that rule.
Right, well, you can always get divorced, but I mean, you're automatically married.
Yeah,
I mean, you honor the other country. And in fact, there are countries where this is actually a problem. Israel is a particular one where the rules are that you can't marry somebody of a different religion. So as a result, there's this enormous marriage trade that goes on in Cyprus, which is about an hour away by boat. So if you want to marry somebody of a different religion, you trot over to Cyprus, you get married, you come back, and Israel honors the marriage, even though they've done something which is illegal in Israel.
Okay, all right. So it's a lot of these rules and regulations that by at least the U.S. Constitution, they have absolutely no right to be making them, and they're all in violation of what are supposed to be the freedoms of the U.S. Constitution, but they don't care about that as long as they can manipulate the rules and change the rules of the Constitution as they think they can do, so that they can do it to their financial advantage.
I don't know if you're aware, but the Congress just a couple days ago passed a rule that if the Secret Service is around, you are not allowed to distribute pamphlets or say anything at all. They can arrest. It's a felony for you to be using free speech in the presence of the Secret Service agents.
Yeah,
That's a law that just passed, and it passed with unanimous vote of the Senate and only 3 dissenting votes in the House of Representatives.
Okay, here's something
And Ron Paul wasn't even one of the dissenting votes. He abstained. He was probably away on a campaign trip or something.
Okay.
But that's, so it's not only the president and the executive branch. I mean, the Congress is fostering all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, this is of course completely unconstitutional, but I'm not so sure you're going to get a judge to declare it unconstitutional. Though the Supreme Court generally is reasonably good when it comes to First Amendment rights. They have nullified a number of these violations of First Amendment. But meanwhile, you get arrested, you have to go through a trial. I mean, until it gets up to the Supreme Court, I mean, it's a long, expensive haul.
Yeah, it's a long, expensive haul. And do you need to answer that phone?
It's not the phone, it's the door.
The amount
That's
of
the doorbell.
lost usefulness of life of people who are put in jail for all these years, you know, when they have a little bit of a gram of cocaine or something like that. And to see the hypocrisy of it, these kingpins in Congress getting away with something much worse than these people. It's just appalling hypocrisy. I had, around 2005, I think is what it was, an opportunity to be with jury duty down in Newark, New Jersey, at the Superior Court, I'm pretty sure is what it was. And it was a young black man who had been caught within something like 200 yards or 100 yards of a school with a gram or more of cocaine, I think is what it was. And it was a pretty prominent black lady judge that was the judge. I think I'd seen her on TV a couple times. I wasn't watching much TV, but I believe she was pretty prominent. And what happened is they allowed me to go through the whole thing, and then they read us all the rules of the jury, and they asked if there were any questions. And I raised my hand, and she motioned for me to come up with the other 2 attorneys, the plaintiff's attorney and the defense attorney, the prosecution attorney and the defense attorney for the person who had gotten caught. And they asked me what the problem was, and I said, I have a real big problem with him going to go to jail for 20-something years and be part of the prison slave labor system and everything like that, where the cocaine kingpin in the United States, George Bush Sr., is out free. And They just quickly talked among themselves, and then she waves me by. We don't need you for a juror. If I'd known they were going to do that to me, I wouldn't have brought it up at that time when they asked if there were any questions, but I'd have waited until I was locked in as a juror.
If you're being interviewed for the jury, you have 3 answers to all questions, or 4 answers. 1, basically 3. Yes, no, I don't know.
Okay. So as usual...
That should be your whole vocabulary when you're being interviewed to be on a jury.
If you want to be, one of the things that I've learned is when all else fails, keep your mouth shut. And that's one of the things I think that I've learned, that if you want to be on jury duty, just keep your mouth shut. And that's what works. I really wanted to be on the jury duty that time because I wanted to create a little bit of a ruckus in the middle of the court. And when I said what the problem was, they didn't want me as a juror anymore because I might have created something, and I might have gone to jail also for disagreeing with them. The situation is, okay, what were most of the other people like in the jail? You dealt with many people who were there on the basis of injustices, you would say, and you want to talk about some of the people you got to meet?
Sure, I've been into a number of jails, actually. It's somewhat interesting to meet people that I don't ordinarily meet. One thing I found out is that most criminals, like doctors or lawyers, are specialists. I met one guy that he told me all he does is blow up buildings, nothing else. If I need a building blown up, I can contact him. And
did he happen to be one of our former CIA directors? Or
no,
like that?
Okay,
yeah,
I'm interested. And I have many cases like that. If you're interested, I have a number of funny stories, but they're not really relevant to the issue of the law. They're just sort of humorous incidents that I've had. And
yeah, I guess I'm just thinking.
I have a lot of fun in prison meeting some of these people, but they have really nothing to do with the law.
As you mentioned, blowing up buildings, that immediately brings to my mind 9/11 and the demolitions of the buildings and who did that, and maybe they have some guy in jail who was involved in that, and they've got him out of the way so we can't talk about having been involved in the demolitions of the buildings, which is what brought them down, and not any little airplane fires, office fires by that time after they'd been out for something like 40 minutes when the real demolitions took the buildings down. And 9/11 is a pretty sore spot with me. Okay, what were the conditions like in the guards in the prison? Which prison was this that you were in? Which jail, rather?
Well, the most recent one is down in Orlando. I've been in the county jail there for 3 weeks. I was treated quite well there, but there were things that they did that were wrong. I was not allowed to use the law library while I was in there, and I was my own counsel, so that...
how did they get away with that? I mean, you're supposed to be. They specifically made it that you could not
use... The rule is, if you're in the medical ward, you can't use the law library. Nobody in the medical ward could use it. And if you're over 70 when you go into that prison, they put you in the medical ward.
Mm-hmm. Was that
which is where I was, though I had nothing particularly wrong with me. But people my age need to really see a medical person. I mean, I saw a nurse every day would come by, so that putting me in the medical ward isn't in itself anything. It's probably proper thing to do with an older person, but not letting them use the law library is completely contrary to the prison rules itself.
Yeah. Okay, so now I have a question. They know you're a jury activist, and you're an activist with regard to these things. They would know that for you to be able to defend yourself with regard to that situation, you would need access to the law library.
Anybody would, especially if they were their own lawyer.
But without a law they made up for you while you were there?
No, that wasn't a law they made up for me.
Law,
that was standard operating procedure.
Okay, standard operating procedure. Okay, I was just wondering if they were making up laws depending on who they had in jail to see if
they may do that. This wasn't a particular case, and they didn't do that with me. If they think somebody is giving them a problem, they
enforce it.
They have ways of taking care of it, but that aren't in the rule book.
Okay. The movie JFK, I think many people have seen that movie. I've seen that movie a few times, and I thought that was a real good movie. Oliver Stone did, and I know an individual who knew him and did another B movie with him. And the particular situation is there was a part dealing with the trial where Clay Shaw had an alias, and the alias clearly related and connected him with the Kennedy assassination. And when he had been booked by the police, he gave his name and he gave his alias. When the judge had the trial going with Garrison, who was played by Kevin Costner, he wouldn't allow Garrison, Kevin Costner, to bring that bit of evidence, in fact, into evidence that he had this alias that would have clearly tied him to the Kennedy assassination. So it was a corrupt federal judge who suppressed the truth by not allowing Garrison to bring that into evidence, and that was the whole case. I mean, I remember in the movie, they dismissed the jury, and Garrison came up to the judge, he says, "That's my whole case." He says, "Well, you're gonna not be able to bring it back."
This happens all the time.
And that happens, so they suppress
The
evidence.
judge suppresses whatever evidence he thinks is not relevant, which, and if it isn't relevant, it probably should be done. But they mostly suppress whatever evidence they don't want you to put in.
So the judges
it varies depending on, first of all, depending on where the judge's sympathies are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then some are more honest than others, though I'll bet there isn't a judge in the country that hasn't suppressed some evidence which shouldn't have been suppressed at some time, maybe innocently and maybe purposely.
Yeah. Now, isn't that a crime for a judge to suppress evidence?
A judge is immune from prosecution.
Yeah. Now, that's a big problem. We've got the law with judges being immune to
No
this kind of
kidding.
thing.
No kidding.
I remember reading about that. The judge later said, because he realized they had him cold, he said, "Oh, the whole case was botched up." He botched the whole case up. Now, this is standard operating procedure with the Warren Commission. They said, we botched up. And it's a standard operating procedure with the 9/11 Commission.
Well, the Warren Commission wasn't
about
really a trial. That was an investigation, wasn't it?
It was an investigation, but they said they botched up and they just allowed things to happen. They said they made all these mistakes in the Kennedy and protecting them and like that. They covered up the truth with a whole bunch of lies within the Warren Commission. And Alan Dulles was questioned about it by somebody who said, Mr. Dulles, he was the CIA director at that time, he was questioned about it. Mr. Dulles, if these people read these books, they're going to see all the inconsistencies and they're going to see we were lying big time. And Alan Dulles' response to him was, the American people don't read. So he knew that they were lying. Now what happened is Kennedy, right before he was assassinated, fired Alan Dulles, the CIA director, and he fired Cabell, I think is who it was, who was the deputy director of the CIA, and he vowed to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces. And then right after that, he's assassinated. Earl Warren was originally asked to head up the Warren Commission. He refused to do that because he didn't want his name associated with what throughout history would be known as...
Is that right, Warren? I thought Warren was the head of the...
No, he wasn't. It was Alan Dulles. Earl Warren was asked to be the head of the Warren Commission. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. So, as I recall, it was Alan Dulles who was the head of the Warren Commission. Earl Warren declined it. But it's still associated with Earl Warren's name.
I thought that Earl Warren...
he was the Supreme Court Justice. He knew he didn't want to be smirching his name for the rest of his life. So he declined the job, and Alan Dulles took it. But he still named it the Warren Commission to smear Earl Warren. Yeah. Okay. So Earl Warren's got a bad rap there, even though he wasn't the head of the Warren Commission, to the best of my recollection. I'll look that up, but I remember that being the case pretty much. These are, I can say that, so if they don't put me in jail, these are somewhat my opinion also as I recollect things. I'm not guaranteeing I'm 100% correct, so they can't put me, these are my opinion that I'm stating, but I think a number of them turn out to be pretty accurate.
Actually, it's not true. If you defame somebody so that they feel that they've been injured, the government can't sue you, but the person who's injured can sue you.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so with the jury nullification, what is the number of feet? Tell us what happened when you were outside of these federal courts trying to pass out literature with regard to the fully informed jury movement, how they would come over and they would threaten you, and then what the best way to handle that situation?
Well, I know what the best way is. I'll tell you how I handled it. I showed up at the New York court. I have a little sign that says jury info. If you want, I can show you the sign. It's in my closet. And I have this pamphlet from the Fully Informed Jury Association and this little one-page flyer that I've told you that the judge is lying, and it's not the duty of the jury to uphold the law. It's the jury's duty to see that justice is done. And I'd pass this out, and I'd be there, and within 5 minutes or 10 minutes, Homeland Security officer would come over and say, "I'm sorry, sir, you're not allowed to pass out literature here without a permit." Well, I said, that's no problem. I got a permit, and I whip out my Constitution and read him the First Amendment.
Uh-huh.
He said, oh, no, you need a permit from the court. I said,
Where in the Constitution does it say you need a
no,
permit?
I said, no, I don't. And he says, well, what is your name, sir? I said, I don't divulge that information.
Okay.
Well, show me your ID. I don't carry ID.
Uh-huh.
I say, and you tell me your name and badge number and show me your credentials.
Uh-huh.
Well, they look at me like they're stunned for about 10 or 15 seconds, and then he usually leaves, and 5 minutes later, he comes back with his boss and 2 federal marshals, something like that, and they explain to me, very nice and polite, you know, this is federal property. There's a regulation against distributing literature on federal property. And I say, I know it's federal property. That's why I'm here. I own it, and you are my servants.
Mm-hmm.
Then they stare at me again for a while, and sooner or later, when I wouldn't leave, they arrested me.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I'm placed under arrest, I don't talk anymore. I fall to the ground, and I don't move a muscle. So.
Would you say why
and
you do that?
I will say I've been arrested 35 times, and I have never been mistreated by a police officer, even though I have hundreds of cases where I've heard that people are really badly beaten up, and well, there's even some cases where guys have been injured for life and have sued and gotten millions of dollars in damages. But I've never. But what I do when I'm lying on the ground is, at first they let me lie there, and then of course it becomes embarrassing. People come over to me, and then they go over to the police and, look, he's there, what are you doing? So finally they call an ambulance and take me to a hospital, and the torture starts in the ambulance. It's the hospitals that do the torture. I've been into 7 hospitals this way, and the first thing they do is they beat on my chest. I usually have black and blue marks for several weeks. In fact, after 3 or 4 days, in fact, it was in one of the, at Newark, after the first Newark incident, I went to see my doctor 3 days later, and he looked at my chest, he says, my heavens, did the police do that to you? I said, oh, the hospital personnel did. And then they run a plug up your nose, which is very painful. Ammonia up my nose, poke me with pins, take all sorts of blood and whatnot out of me. I've been sodomized, they stuffing up my rear end. I've been given knockout drops and kept overnight. When I was at Bellevue, once they put me in what I consider their interrogation room or something. You're in a room which is concrete walls all around it, roughly this size, and there's one big chair under a great big spotlight from above, and you're placed in there, and you can move around in the room, but there's no toilet facilities, no sink or whatnot, so I just urinate on the floor.
Yeah, you don't have any choice. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So the one way you avoid getting severely injured is by not resisting.
Oh
in
yeah.
any way.
Oh no.
Because they can.
That's
a mistake.
That's a terrible mistake, and you don't even have to be able to resist. You've got to just be careful that you don't wave your arm or something like that. And I understand a policeman's problem. He doesn't know if I have a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to, of course, be extremely careful to make any sort of motion that might indicate you can, but they can't wait till you pull out your gun and shoot them. So I understand, but I do nothing. I just lie on the ground and won't move, and I don't get into an argument with him. You're not going to win an argument with the policeman. I mean, he's not there to be convinced of what you're doing. So, and I suppose that's why all through my life I've never been bothered by a police. It's usually if you're trying to escape them or you badmouth them. I mean, they're very sensitive.
They're touchy.
So in my case, they just sort of look dumbfounded.
It's a good way, the non-violence, to avoid getting bad.
Yeah, and I say 35 arrests, and I don't think I've ever been molested by a police officer.
The situation with them doing the chest blow when you get to the emergency room of the hospital.
No, it starts in the
It
ambulance.
starts the ambulance. Sometimes they're thinking you're in a systole and they need to get your heart beating again. Have they put the EKG electrodes on before they do
Well,
that?
not in the ambulance.
Because they should probably be putting EKG electrodes on before they do that. Because situation you don't want to whack somebody.
Everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean,
Those are just, okay.
there's no reason for them, first of all, there's no reason for them to take me to a hospital, but you see what happened is, this was a regulation. What I was doing was avoiding something that's like a ticket that you get for parking in the wrong place, which is basically what I was doing, because I was parked in the wrong place, except I wasn't in a car, I was passing out literature. And they can't take me into court. What they do is they give me a citation, and you say you can pay the $100 fine, or you can go in here, just like a traffic ticket. Of course, I don't pay the $100 fine, and I don't show up for the hearing. I mean, but that's beside the point. And so what do? So they take me to, they call an ambulance and have me taken away to a hospital.
With juries, is there any way they can demand from the judge that they feel they haven't gotten enough information for them to make a fully informed decision about certain things?
That happens from time to time. I don't know that they can ask for more information, but the jury often asks the judge for clarification. Mm-hmm. I think that's, as far as I know, that happens. I haven't personally seen it, but I mean, from what I've heard is...
ask for clarification.
Yes.
Because what I'm thinking about is in the movie JFK, when Garrison, played by Kevin Costner, brought up the issue of the alias of Clay Bertrand Shaw, which was going to be his whole case. And then the judge stopped the whole thing right there. And then he called a recess of the court, and all the jurors had to get out of the room. And then he comes up to the judge and he says, "That's my whole case. That's my whole case. You can't do this." And he says, "Well, I'm doing it." That's what he said. Now, when the jury saw that the judge, stopped him right in the tracks there and then dismissed the whole jury, could the jury come back and say, "Judge, we know you're suppressing evidence here. We want to know what he has to say about that"?
That, as soon as a juror said that, I suspect he would be dismissed.
Okay.
You don't accuse the judge.
All right, okay, so you can't accuse the judge. But can you say, we, the jury, want the further clarification on it? Because we suspect there's more evidence.
What happened? Why did you want us out of the courtroom? I would think that would be a legitimate question. And they would say, the judge would say, "You're not entitled to that information. That's why I sent you out of the courtroom."
Okay, in that situation,
that's what would happen.
When the judge is suppressing evidence in a criminal fashion that he can seem to get away with because he's a federal judge, then the jury...
Well, there are a lot of legitimate reasons sometimes for suppressing stuff. For example, if it's hearsay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? Mm-hmm. Or if the guy wants to introduce some evidence which hasn't been checked and worked out beforehand. In other words, he's bringing in new evidence which nobody had a chance to examine. Before a trial, both sides are entitled to examine the other side's evidence. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't just show up in court one day and say, "Oh, I got this other witness, Judge. I want to put him on the stand." He won't allow, or he shouldn't allow that.
Yeah. So
because the other side hasn't had a chance to interrogate him. In fact, the court rules are you can interrogate him. Now, I've asked in my jury tampering case, I want the names not only of all the witnesses that they intend to call and anybody who's been tampered. I want the names of everybody that sat on the grand jury, and I intend to interview them before there's any trial so that I know exactly what went on in that grand jury.
Okay. So
and I'm entitled to this. That doesn't mean I'll get it. I mean, the courts don't follow their own rules, but that's a rule of the court that I'm entitled to previously interview an individual in the presence of a court reporter and somebody who could administer an oath.
Okay, so you as a lay person could go in and demand...
No, as the lawyer. I'm acting as a lawyer in my own case.
Okay.
I mean, I'm the lawyer in my case, so I'm right to do it.
You were going pro se in these things. I'm just trying to figure out, like, when the judge, when it becomes apparent that the judge is suppressing critical evidence, as he did in the movie JFK, and in your case, and in all these other cases where they're suppressing evidence and getting unjust verdicts, is there any way that the jury as a whole, so that one juror alone will not be dismissed, can say, "Hey, wait a minute, you're going to bring out that evidence because we feel this is critical evidence"?
The jury can't instruct the judge anything.
Okay.
The lawyer can say that.
Okay.
Either lawyers, and either lawyer can object before the judge makes a decision. In fact, usually if one lawyer requests something, normally the judge will ask the opinion of the opposing lawyer before he makes a decision, unless it's some trivial or obvious matter, but that would be the appropriate way for the judge to handle it. And I think that happens all the time, and there are legitimate reasons for not putting, for example, it's hearsay evidence. Okay, so-and-so said that something or other. Well, that's not real evidence, because somebody heard Bill speak about something 3 weeks later.
Well, the jury could decide some of these things, whether they were appropriate or inappropriate.
Well, the judge generally shouldn't and usually wouldn't allow hearsay evidence to be introduced.
Well, I guess I'm wondering about the case of Kevin Costner playing Garrison, the attorney, when the jury all saw the judge stop the case cold when he was trying to bring up the evidence or the fact of the altered name and alias that Clay Bertrand Shaw had. What could the jury have done in terms of, as a group, saying to the judge, hey, wait a minute, we're the jury. We want to know this information. You cannot deny us this information. They're entitled to know it. So
They're not entitled to know it, but if they feel that they don't have enough evidence because they didn't get that information, it is their obligation to find a not guilty verdict based on the fact that they have reasonable doubt.
Okay, that's a very good point, because here we're dealing with a lot of people being sentenced to jails because of judges who are criminally themselves, as criminals, withholding evidence.
What I advise, what I haven't advised any particular juror, but what I put out over the internet and everything is that if the judge tells you that you must uphold the law as I give it to you, he's lying. And first of all, he probably doesn't give you the whole law, and he probably doesn't even know the law. You'd be surprised how many times the judges don't get the law correct. But in any event,
I got a joke for you.
but in any event, I claim that if the juror is not given the written statute, he's obligated to find a not guilty verdict on the grounds that he has reasonable doubt.
Okay.
This has nothing to do with jury nullification.
Okay.
This is reasonable doubt,
Okay. All right.
which is what the O.J. Simpson case was. It had nothing to do with jury nullification.
All right.
Every jury,
Reasonable doubt.
in my opinion, the jurors had no option but to find him not guilty, even though I believe he's guilty as can be.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the chief witness lied under oath. They didn't have any weapons. They didn't have any clothes. They didn't have any witnesses. I mean, there certainly was reasonable doubt in that case.
Yeah. So there's really a major flaw and a major structural problem to the judiciary that they're able to suppress so much evidence and do so.
I think that if they followed all the rules and the judge was really impartial, I think the judiciary system in general would work quite well.
Right.
The problem is they don't.
They don't.
I mean,
How can they be held accountable?
If the decision is reviewable, that is, if you can appeal it, then the judge is completely immune, because you get a second chance, basically. Now, there's a famous case, in fact, that I often quote. It's a case of Huminsky versus Corsones. Corsones was a judge at a trial, and Huminsky was a guy who had nothing to do with the trial, but he was interested in it, like you go to trials sometimes. And Huminsky came in with his van with signs posted all over it about how the courts are corrupt and everything else. And he was ordered to move his van out of the lot, and he wouldn't do it. And he was arrested and sentenced for contempt of court or something like that. And he appealed it on First Amendment rights. And the first judge sided with him and found him not guilty, dismissed the case, but then it was appealed to the appellate court, and the appellate court held him up. And many lawyers and judges cite this as the case of, you see, that they can do it, and they didn't do anything to Judge Corsones. He tried to sue Judge Corsones. They said she had immunity. But of course, they were wrong in this case, because what the law says, the judge is immune unless the situation is appealable. Now you see, what Corsones did was, she made her decision and enforced it the same day. So there was, it wasn't an appealable decision. I mean, she was never, I mean, by the time, there's nothing, he couldn't not get back into the court and see the trial and keep his car in there. So the judges repeated, I claim that that's the one case I know of where he should have been able to sue Corsones. Okay. I mean, I think that if you read the law as it's written, that's what it says, because he had no chance to appeal the decision.
Okay. All right. I was somewhat involved in some aspects of the TWA Flight 800 case, because I was out in Long Island working at a hospital, St. Charles Hospital and Rehab Center, right after that happened, just a few days after that happened. And I went out on the Sunrise Highway to talk with people, and I talked with people that saw it all happen. The missile hit the plane, and all of eastern Long Island knew it was a missile, whereas western Long Island and the rest of the country, were believing the big official government lie about exploding fuel tanks, which is a...
Oh, is that what the official version?
That was the official, was exploding fuel tanks because, fire, spark got into the vapors, the JP4, jet fuel 4, in the ullage, that's the gas vapors up above the fuel.
Okay, but you believe that these people were firing missiles, that this was
They
an
were
error?
conducting a test.
A test. I mean, they didn't intend to knock this plane down.
And most likely it was just an accident when they were testing the system. But the truth was suppressed. But it was interesting how all of eastern Long Island basically knew it was a Navy missile that shot it down, almost certainly a Navy missile. And western Long Island and the whole rest of the United States believed it was exploding fuel tanks when that was a physical impossibility.
Yes, I'd never heard this missile story until today.
Yeah, but what was really bad is how they suppressed the truth about that whole thing through dishonesty in the judiciary. And then Jim Sanders, who was a retired Southern California police officer, who basically had aircraft accident investigation certification, and he thought it was terrible. His wife, I believe, was the chief stewardess for TWA.
Oh, wait a minute. Was this suppressed by the judiciary or by the executive branch?
Both. Both. It was suppressed by the judges, who were totally corrupt. And what it was
did they
what it was is this. The Navy Special Ops team, Navy SEALs, went to recover parts of what was the missile. Okay?
Yeah.
And they knew it was a missile. And they were told by Bill Clinton that they could not talk about
Who's they?
The Navy Special Operations team that recovered parts of the missile.
Not the judge, not yet anyway.
No, it wasn't the judge that suppressed that. That was an executive order from Bill Clinton.
Okay.
He said they were not allowed, the Navy SEALs team, the Navy Special Operations team, from saying that they had recovered parts of a missile. I know that from Rod Fry.
In other words, that's the executive that's suppressing it, not the judiciary.
Not the judiciary. In that particular situation, he suppressed that as, in quote, in the interests of national security.
Yeah.
Now, for federal employees, there's something called the Whistleblower Protection Act, that normally if you see something wrong and you see a big lie about something like that, you could say, well, I'm sorry, Bill Clinton, you can't suppress me from saying this because this is whistleblower. I'm a whistleblower. I'm one of the Navy SEALs that saw that part of that missile there. And he said that the provisions of the Whistleblower Protection Act do not apply to Navy Special Ops team, Navy SEALs team, such and such, again, in the interest of national security. So what Rod Fry basically told me with the Government Accountability Project down in Washington, D.C., this is different than the General Accounting Office. They keep on changing names, by the way. This is a way of sort of like aliases, because it gets a bad reputation, they just do a name change on it. But he said they had Navy Special Ops teams down there talking about how they had seen evidence of the missile, and when the executive orders came out, they couldn't discuss it in national security. They had the Whistleblower Protection Act, and they couldn't discuss it that way in the interest of national security. They said, you go to jail for the rest of your life if you talk about what you've seen, if you violate that presidential order when it's in the interest of national security. And you're a Navy person? I mean, the president's the commander-in-chief. They can suppress the truth and lie about the whole damn thing if they want. That's what they did. So Bill Clinton,
they don't even have to lie. They can just say, I can't discuss that on my Fifth Amendment right that it might incriminate me.
Yeah. Yeah. So the whole system is a lie. And I guess we've just got to keep innocent people out of jail and get the guilty people convicted. It's difficult when you've got so many corrupt federal
we ought to
judges.
keep most of the guilty people out of jail, too.
Excuse me, I'm sorry?
We should keep most of the guilty people. In
Because
fact,
they're really not guilty. It's not
in fact,
anything
I advocate that there should be a general amnesty, that every person who's in prison now should be released, because either they did not have a jury trial, in which case they were denied their rights under Article 3, Section 2, and Amendment 6 of the U.S. Constitution, or if they had a jury trial, the judge committed perjury with the intent to obstruct justice.
Okay.
And he informed the jury that it must uphold the law as he gives it to them.
So how could we maybe get a petition going for?
Well, I've already put this out in public that I'm calling for a general amnesty. Everybody who's in prison, they may be guilty or not, but they have not had a trial according to the
true law.
To the true law.
Yeah.
And I also think that I'm calling for citizen tribunals to try all the judges.
Yeah.
And any judge, which means every judge, unless there's some exceptions. Every once in a while there's some judge which is really honest and tells the jury the truth, but they're rare, should be tried and at least dismissed.
Yeah, they should be disbarred and dismissed. They
Disbarred.
shouldn't have a legal profession to fall back on when they're
Look,
dismissed.
they've committed perjury with the intent to obstruct justice.
Sure.
They should actually have long jail sentences.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at least they should be disbarred and dismissed from being judges.
Yes. Yeah,
As a minimum.
Yeah, long jail sentences I think would be appropriate for.
Well, that would be in keeping with the law. It's not clear. Again, it's the sort of thing it's a judgment. It's not clear that you always give them the major sentences. In other words, these are things which individual judges didn't, mostly they were ignorant. And in fact, they were under orders from the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So basically, it's the Supreme Court judges who are the ones that have taken the ones. And of course, the Supreme judges that made the law are probably long dead by now. So that
they can't.
So that it's not clear that they should go to prison, but they should certainly stop being allowed to practice law if they don't know what the basic law is, just on the grounds of ignorance.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things is there was an attorney by the name of Boyd Ed Graves who exposed the creation of AIDS as a bioweapon and the giving contaminated hepatitis B vaccines to a lot of people in the IV drug abusing community, gay community, caused the whole AIDS epidemic. And he took his case to the U.S. Supreme Court as the International AIDS Apology. And his particular case was dismissed as frivolous. So that shows that, 12 Supreme Court justices were liars.
Well, 11. 9. Well, it varies when it was. There were, I think, as many as 15 at one time on the court.
Well, there are various
Varies
websites that give about as detailed a picture of how AIDS was created as a bioweapon, and it was given through these contaminated blood products and contaminated hepatitis B vaccines given to members of the IV drug abusing gay community that there's established beyond fact. But how they were able to deny the truth about that in the U.S. Supreme Court and dismiss his case as frivolous is totally absurd. And by suppressing the truth, also, they're suppressing the truth about a lot of alternatives. They're very inexpensive, that work a lot better than the conventional big pharmaceutical drug companies make. They make all their profits off of it. It was partially it was getting rid of people, a genocide thing. And the other thing is if you cause more disease, you make more money off of the drugs used to treat it, and they're making their money off
Well, I don't know the thing is, but it's been established that they had prisoners years ago that they used to give them to test for diseases, and they promised they'd reduce their sentence or something like that if they lived. But I mean, this is documented, well-known stuff. They don't do that anymore. At least they don't do it legally and openly anymore.
Yeah.
But
Tuskegee experiment was just the tip of the iceberg.
But I mean, they were doing this. It was standard operating procedure, more or less, in some of the prisons.
It seems like we just have so much lying in this country that in many ways it's worse than Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia. The only thing is, what we've got now is we've got the internet, and they did not have access to the internet at that time. And as long as we have the internet, we're going to have the truth available to us in a way that makes it more easily available than having people with printing presses.
I don't know worse than Stalinist Russia, but we are in Stalinist Russia right now. It's just that the numbers haven't gone up to, but they'll get there. They're putting them away at a pretty fast clip. And we're certainly not Germany yet, but it took Hitler 10 years to get the genocide.
And we're heading in that direction.
Well, it's going to be required because as we start keeping more and more people in prison, it's just going to get too expensive. You're going to have to start doing away with them.
You think they're going to start killing people?
Well, not immediately.
But
That
when it
takes
gets
a
to be-
while.
yeah, okay. it
But
takes-
they're already arresting people and not charging them, they're giving them trials. In fact, one such person spoke at the Freedom Law Center Saturday night, just a few days ago. I heard this, and in fact, she was a former CIA agent, and she blew the whistle on some things that the CIA were doing, and she was seized, she was not charged, she didn't have a trial, he spent 11 months in prison.
11 months without a trial.
In prison.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
And according to her story, she said that she kept asking for a trial, and they said, well, you're mentally incompetent, you can't stand trial yet. If you get better, we'll have a trial. Well, what's the sign that I get better? She says, well, as long as you claim you're innocent, you're obviously mentally ill. If you will confess, we will give you a trial.
This is the forced confessions they use under
I mean,
Stalinism.
I mean, you know, this was her story. I don't know about that stuff, but she certainly was in prison for 11 months
Yeah.
without charges or a trial.
Yeah. All in violation of the Constitution. Yeah. Now the situation is this: there were a number of changes that were put in the law during the administration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt that took away our rights as citizens and gave those rights to corporations, and we
Or
became-
even to the federal government.
yeah.
I mean, all the social programs that the federal government runs were never intended to be in the Constitution, and I mean, that includes Social Security. I'm not saying whether they're good or bad or whatnot. They were just not
Intended to
intended
be
that
part
the
of the
federal
Constitution.
government would ever do those sort of things.
Yeah. Maybe it should be that people on juries should disregard the instructions of the judge with regard to all their extra rules,
Let
extra constitutional.
let me tell you a story.
Okay.
There's a guy who lived out in the woods. He was a poor guy, lived with his family, and he used to get his meat by hunting deer. And once he was hunting deer out of season, and the game warden caught him and had him arrested. And they went to court. His case was, he admitted that he shot and killed this deer out of season, and of course the game warden had the evidence. He said, but I'm very poor, I have no money, my family was starving. If I didn't get some meat, my family would have gotten very sick, and my children, some of them probably would have died. But he confessed, I mean, he didn't challenge, not only didn't he challenge, he admitted that he did this. So the jury goes out and comes back with a not guilty verdict. The judge says to them, not guilty, he confessed. And the foreman says, we decided he was lying.
Is that right? So
That's not a real story, that's an ephemeral story.
okay, but this is an example
But-
of jury nullification, something that people could do if they saw what the real truth behind
Well,
something.
the truth is that the judge can't ask them, they don't have to say. Though the judges have, on occasion, after a trial is over. I know of a case in Washington where a guy was charged with cocaine or something like that, and there was no doubt of his guilt. And it came back and the jury was hung. 2 elderly black women voted not guilty. And the jury was already dismissed and over, and that case was over. And the judge called the women, he says, look, you don't have to tell me anything, you're not under obligation to tell me. He says, but I'm curious, with that evidence, and the guy confessing, I mean, how could you find him not guilty? And they said, Judge, we're not sending any more black men to prison, period.
Okay.
Now, that is not a good legal reason,
Okay.
but the jury has that power.
Okay. So the jury
In other-
realizes that it can disregard the instructions of the judge.
The
and
jury
vote
can
not
do,
guilty.
the
They
jury
whatever
can
they
do
want.
anything it wishes.
That's good. Jury nullification.
That's the point.
Yeah, and they can set people free
And,
if they feel they're
and
railroaded.
they're not answerable to it. Those women could have said, Judge, it's none of your business.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is a really important point to drive home. The jury can't be punished, but if they sense the judge is suppressing evidence, or if they sense that anybody's suppressing evidence and somebody's going to be railroaded into jail and they don't, they are totally free to
if you
say
have any,
not guilty.
if you have any reasonable doubt,
Vote not guilty.
you are obligated to vote
vote
not
not
guilty.
obligated.
You are obligated to vote not guilty. And I think the O.J. Simpson case was a classic that everybody wanted him tried and put away. And of course, you know, he committed crimes after he was out and did go to prison. And I doubt that there was anybody that didn't believe he did it. I mean, like I believe he did it. But they didn't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt.
There's more to the O.J. Simpson case. I was coming down Bloomfield Avenue in 2001 listening to WBAI radio. And they said that over in England it was known that EDTA was found in the blood that was sprinkled on the floor. EDTA is ethylene diamine tetracetic acid. It's a chelating agent for calcium. Basically what it is calcium is necessary for the blood to coagulate. So basically if you leave the calcium in the blood, it'll congeal and you won't be able to look at the formed elements of the blood, the individual red blood cells. So there's no way that EDTA, ethylene diamine tetracetic acid, is the chelating agent you put in the blood to chelate the calcium so the blood doesn't clot, so you can look at it in a microscope and look at the formed elements of the blood, the leukemic cells, the red blood cells, and get a diagnosis from that. And when I heard that, I said, who put the EDTA in his blood? They went to a test tube, where they draw it in one of those vacutainer tubes, and they took that vacutainer tube and they sprinkled the blood in the Bronco because it had been congealed with the EDTA in it. That's what enabled it to be sprinkled instead of coming out in one big clot. So it gets really complicated about the O.J. Simpson, but I know some people that got involved in that a little bit. And I actually met an individual in Phoenix, Arizona in 2008 who was a paralegal working, I believe he said, the Patriot Law firm. And he said he came back to the file cabinet one day and he opened up the whole file when they were all gone. And he said that O.J. Simpson had come back as the murders were occurring and he got scared and he ran away. I've subsequently understood.
Oh, we know he did run away. We saw him in the car running away from the police.
Yeah.
I was watching it on TV as they were chasing him.
Yeah. So he came back. He said it was true that he did beat his wife, but he came back and he was afraid they were going to kill him, so he ran away as they were killing Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson.
Right.
And what it is I happen to have known a young lady dentist up at St. Charles who went to dental school at SUNY Buffalo, and she said it was well known that O.J. Simpson would come around and distribute, as a thank you at the bars in Buffalo, little packets of cocaine to people. So he was involved at some degree in the cocaine distribution. If he dealt with those elements, he was dealing with that element, and they wanted to get even, they'll do anything.
You could just go down the
Yeah,
street and pick anybody you want. There's certainly, I'm sure if you pick 6 people, at least one of them is using marijuana. 50 million people in this country smoke marijuana.
We are right now at 57 minutes. We could go with another mini DV tape if you want, or
Whatever you'd like.
okay. I've got another mini DV tape. It's going to take me a little while to.
All right.
So we'll continue. Actually, we've got 3 more.
All right, let's finish here.
Okay. Well, okay. So we'll just finish here, and then I'll go to the next mini DV tape. Okay. Let me just turn it off here and figure out which button to push here.